Daniel Adebayo was no ordinary CEO. Born in a working-class neighborhood where dreams often seemed distant, Daniel had never had the chance to live in the comfort of the elite. His childhood was marked by sacrifice, by a nursing mother who juggled her demanding job and her role as a single parent, and a working-class father who firmly believed that a solid education could be the key to a better life. Daniel, from a young age, learned that every victory required iron discipline and constant commitment. His career was not the result of a stroke of luck, but the fruit of unfailing perseverance. After successfully completing his studies in computer engineering thanks to scholarships, Daniel began working in a small technology company. From his early days as an analyst, he quickly understood that in this world, competence and the ability to seize the right opportunities made all the difference. He climbed the ranks one by one, beating the competition in his path, until becoming the CEO of NovaCorp, an internationally renowned technology company. But as NovaCorp grew and its name became synonymous with success, Daniel realized that he was gradually losing touch with those who truly contributed to the company's success. The employees, the real engines of the machine, the people who, day after day, kept the company running behind the scenes, were nothing more than blurred faces in his thoughts. His management became more distant, his meetings with field teams less frequent, and decisions were made at a luxurious table in elegant offices, far from the daily concerns of employees. One morning, during a meeting with his executive committee, an innocuous remark from a senior executive, David Meunier, made a painful truth resonate in Daniel's mind. David, in his usual dismissive tone, explained, "You know, Daniel, it doesn't really matter what the rank-and-file employees think as long as they do their job." These words were like a stab in his heart. At the moment, Daniel did not dare to answer anything, but a haunting question began to swirl in his mind. What do they think of me, these employees who are often considered interchangeable? He realized that the members of the executive team, although brilliant in their field, saw themselves as the only important players, ignoring the crucial role of each in the hierarchy. But what about those below? Those who, without them, the company would not function? And how did he actually treat them? This marked a turning point for him. There was no longer any question of remaining in the comfort of his sumptuous office, surrounded by his high-level collaborators. He felt an urgent need to rediscover the reality of his employees, to understand their daily lives, their struggles and their aspirations. This is how he made a radical decision. He would disguise himself as a simple employee, far from the prestige and privileges that were now his. A few days later, Daniel disappeared behind the mask of David Kouossi, a simple receptionist. He swapped his crisp suit for plain black pants and a white shirt that bore no luxury markings. He grew a light beard, changed his haircut and put on thick-rimmed glasses. Most important, however, was his badge, David Kouossi, Receptionist. When he walked through the doors of NovaCorp that day, his heart was racing. This imposing hall, which once seemed so familiar, now seemed gigantic and cold. Modern architecture with its glass walls, cold colors and immaculate marble floors seemed so distant to him, like a world that no longer belonged to him. Each office he passed, each corridor he took, sent him an image of the world he had helped to build, but in which he was now an intruder. From his first day as David, he was struck by the brutality of the reality that lay beneath the company's impeccable surface. He saw Mark, a sales director with a reputation as a charismatic leader during meetings, behaving like a tyrant with the reception staff. Mark did not give his colleagues a second of consideration. He gave them orders in a dry, almost arrogant tone, without the slightest glance. Every time he walked through the hall, he didn't even make an effort to greet those on duty. Claire, the human resources manager, although always full of inspiring speeches on inclusiveness during major management meetings, was completely different with the maintenance workers. She systematically ignored them, did not speak to them, and if one of them dared to greet her, she responded with a disdainful gesture, as if their existence had no importance. Daniel had always believed that Claire was a model of kindness in the company, but he was now witnessing another side of her personality, much colder and contemptuous. And then there was Thomas, a young intern who had no shame in making racist and sexist jokes against those around him, thinking he would be safe from any consequences. No one dared to stop him, no one defended him. Everyone seemed afraid to question this young man's attitude, as if his position in the company protected him from any reprimand. But in the midst of this toxic behavior, Daniel also discovered glimpses of humanity that gave him hope. Amen, a security guard with a sincere smile, greeted everyone she passed, whether she knew them or not. She would bring coffee to the front desk staff without expecting anything in return, just to make their day a little easier. She wasn't looking for any recognition, but her kindness made the difference in this world of coldness and indifference. And Leo, a discreet but extremely knowledgeable computer technician, had a habit of making himself available to anyone who needed help. Whether for an urgent technical problem or a simple question, Leo never hesitated to be of service, whether it was a member of the executive committee or a simple cleaning agent. He treated everyone with equal respect, which was not at all the case with his higher-ranking colleagues. These small actions, these moments of truth, generosity and dignity, left Daniel deeply moved. It was a revelation. In a company as brilliant as Nova Corp, there were both dazzling successes and a growing distance between those who possessed power and those who ran the machine. As the days go by, Daniel felt a mixture of anger and sadness that was eating him from the inside. How could he have been so blind to the reality of his company's employees? The contrast between his world as an executive and that of workers at the bottom of the ladder had become more and more obvious. He had been too focused on the growth of Nova Corp, on the numbers, the partnerships and the innovation, to realize that injustice lurked behind the facade of smiles, in every little corner of this ivory tower that he had helped to erect. He was angry with himself, but even more so, he was angry with this system that he had helped to nourish without ever questioning it. The one who favored appearance over substance, the soulless speeches on inclusiveness, while the actions totally contradicted the values he advocated. Mark, with his usual arrogance, embodied everything that had become toxic in the company. One morning in particular left an indelible mark on his mind. He leaned down to help Maria, a cleaning lady, picking up files that had fallen on the floor in the hall, as he would have done for anyone else. Maria, a woman in her 50s, of immigrant origin, fought every day to keep the space spotless, but she was never noticed. Daniel was in no hurry. He looked at her kindly, offering her a helping hand as she struggled to pick up a pile of scattered documents. It was then that he heard a familiar voice. Mark, the sales manager, was walking across the hall, his gaze sliding over Daniel without even recognizing him. When he stopped in front of them, a disdainful grin marred his face. "David, leave it. It's not your job to be a hero for, well, you know." The implication was blatant, almost insulting. Daniel understood that Mark was referring to the fact that he was only a simple receptionist, well below his position as director. A shiver of anger rose within him, a heat that filled his heart, but he restrained himself. He couldn't react. Not yet. This was not the time to stand out, to break the mask he wore. The time would come, he knew it. But for now he just smiled, as he would have done if it hadn't mattered. The following days were marked by this same observation, these small scenes of daily injustices. Executives who did not bother to greet security agents, human resources managers who ignored talents who did not correspond to their expectations, and this culture of contempt which seemed to infiltrate everywhere, from the top to the lowest level. Then, a week later, Daniel made a radical decision. A decision that would shake up the company and everyone's expectations. He called a general meeting with all the employees of Nova Corp, something which, ordinarily, was not in his habits. The employees were perplexed. Why was the receptionist, David Kouassi, who had nothing to do with management, called to speak at this meeting? The murmur in the room intensified. Some wondered if it was a joke, others laughed nervously, thinking there must be a mistake. No one dared to imagine what was going to happen. Daniel took the stage calmly, but with a weight on his shoulders. He could feel the curiosity, the impatience in the air. The employees' gaze was fixed on him, some judging him with condescension, others intrigued by the situation. There was silence until Daniel took off his glasses, placed them on the table, and slowly smoothed his growing beard. He stood up, scanning the audience with a piercing gaze, and uttered these words, in a firm but calm voice. "Some of you know me as David Kouassi, but my real name is Daniel Adebayo, and I am the CEO of Nova Corp. The shock was immediate. The silence that followed seemed unreal. Daniel looked at the frozen faces around him, some people unable to hide their astonishment. He even saw Mark, who looked away as if he had just found himself caught in the act. The employees who had looked down on this simple receptionist could no longer ignore the fact that he was their superior. Daniel let the silence last for a few seconds, feeling the tension rise in the room, before continuing. For a week, I saw things that left me speechless. I saw incredible talents ignored, dedicated individuals treated as invisible. I saw acts of sincere kindness, but also contempt, arrogance and behavior that does not align with what we stand for here at Nova Corp. He looked around the room, examining every corner as if it were a last look before a big change. Then, in a resolute tone, he added, Nova Corp is supposed to be a company of innovation, excellence and respect. What I've seen over the last few days in no way reflects that. We're going to change that, and it starts today. The employees were speechless, some finding it hard to believe what was happening. Daniel then announced his first measures, a strong act of his desire to reform the company, to make it more human. Immediate promotion of Amina and Leo, for their exemplary professionalism, their humanity and their benevolence. Internal assessments for the frames, with strict criteria, to evaluate their behavior and their way of managing teams. Mark and Claire would be included in this first wave of evaluations, and sanctions were considered if they did not change their attitude. Creating a mentoring program, aiming to give a chance to those who had gone under the radar, to those who, despite their potential, had never been seen or heard. Daniel ended his speech with these words. I'll leave you to your thoughts. We will work together to make Nova Corp better, more just, more human. After the meeting, murmurs circulated in the corridors. Some employees, visibly embarrassed, timidly approached him to apologize for their past behavior. Others lowered their heads, unable to meet his gaze. But Daniel knew that it was not to receive an apology that he had acted. No. What he wanted was to create change, to begin a process that would go well beyond himself. Nova Corp had just received a warning. The game had just changed. Daniel had laid the foundation stone of a business that would not only be successful, but also fair, respectful and humane.